For our agenda, I'm just going to briefly talk about the Mattel Credit Union, about myself, just a quick one, and the brokerage that I'm with. Then we're going to dive into the real estate effects and statistics due to COVID-19. The statistics will be behind for about 1 to 2 months because it takes a while to get all of the information in. And then from there, we'll talk about the mistakes to avoid when you're buying or selling a home. Okay, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end of it. Mattel Credit Union services the Mattel, Fisher Price, and American Girl. And these are the eligible memberships that, if you're an employee of one of those and then you have your uncles, children, or cousin or whatnot, they can become members for free. And this is, you just need $1 to open a savings account. And for more information, you could contact Sherry Gilbert here at the bottom of the screen. Just a little bit about me. So going forward, anything that you'll see in blue is kind of like what I'm just going to be focusing on. Not much to focus on here about me. Slides will be self-explanatory for the most part, and it's meant to be used as a guide. But what I'm going to be focusing on would be those that are marked kind of like in blue. That way, you know as a viewer right away which ones I'm going to be focusing on. So I am currently a real estate agent and an investor. And my relationship with the Mattel Credit Union is, so I'm not an employee. I did used to do consultations with them. I'm one of their consultants in the past. And that's how I got that partnership with Mattel Credit Union and its members that are buying or selling a home. A lot of people would ask me, why Vista Sotheby's International Realty? There are other great companies there like Century 21, Keller Williams, and the others. Because I come from a credit union background, and at the credit union level, we pride ourselves on giving a great service for our members. And when I went to Sotheby's International Realty, there's a saying in there that luxury is a service and experience. It's not about the price point. And that just meshed well and marries well with the ideals that I've had when I was still with the credit union. And it was just a good fit for me to join the company because that's where the big focus was. So putting some sense on the situation, a lot of people have asked me, just to kind of like compare the stocks and the real estate market. And when people started asking me about this one, this was way back when we just started our lockdown, like stay at home, and stocks was going down the drain. Benefit of hindsight, now we're about 4 months out, and the stocks have recovered, but there are still some volatility, while real estate have actually gone up, and we'll see more of that later on. But the main difference between the two is there's a statistics that I couldn't find, but I know I've seen it somewhere that when the stocks go down, it doesn't necessarily mean that the stocks are going down. So that's again, this past couple of months have been even a better indication of that's a true statistic. But to summarize it, there's a different behavior, and for stocks, it's a paper asset that people can easily sell. That if you panic tomorrow, you can sell that right away. But it's not the same case for real estate. It's not as easy to do it on those cases because it's a hard asset, right? And with stay at home, there's that added I wouldn't say benefit, but added importance is the word that I'm looking for on being in a home that you like, or if you want to move to a different home, then you're renting or you're buying. So there was that added benefit of thinking about how important a home was because of the stay at home. So there's a lot of things that are different that's happening between the stocks and the real estate. Another question that I would get is, will we see real estate market go down in 2000, like in 2008 with the financial crisis? Again, a lot of these questions were being asked, especially when stay-at-home started. But even now, some people are speculating that maybe towards the end of the year, or maybe 1 to 2 years from now, it would go down. I don't think so. At the most, it might just level, or if anything, it would still be going up. And the big reason for the 2008 financial crisis, when we saw that happen, is a lot of the lenders back then were lending a lot more from what the homes were valued at. So for example, if the house was worth 500,000, maybe they would lend out 550,000, thinking that the houses are going to go up anyway, that if they had to foreclose on a house, they will be able to get their money back. Well, a lot of people, with the economy collapsing, a lot of people were losing their jobs. And then because the houses were watered down, that's the key point. It was watered down, meaning that it didn't have the value anymore. So then that's why there was a big collapse. Well, the lenders have learned their lesson, and a lot of them are not lending that way anymore. Now you have to be putting down at least 20% down payment. And for some cases that you could do 0%. The 0% are the ones that are government backed, typically the VA loans. So for those that are veterans on the call, that there is still that program for you, or the one that if you're not a veteran and you want to take advantage of a government sponsored program, that you could do a 5% down payment. But those have insurance or what we call as a PMI, and we will talk a little bit more about that later on, but really more so for Thursday because that goes into Lending 101. A lot of the reason for the collapse in 2008 was the number of foreclosures. The more foreclosures, the more opportunity for people to buy, possibly at a discount. But in this case, if we just consider the first 6 months, 2020 is at a historic low, at least from 2008. But I would take that as a grain of salt. I don't think these are true numbers because when stay at home started, the government was quick to react on for people that were going to be losing their jobs or people that can't make their mortgage payments, that there was a moratorium on foreclosures, right? So because of that, these numbers are not going to be comparable because of the regulations that the government imposed. So it would be very interesting to see that I think it has been lifted now, but the government I think is putting that back again, just so until for the remainder of the year. So this is going to be a statistic that we'll have to watch out for. So what we'll do here as far as statistics is we'll talk about California first. We'll go down to LA County, and then we'll go down to South Bay. Only because a lot of the Mattel Credit Union members live in the South Bay area, but you might be looking at a house in or you might be owning a house that's not in LA County or not in South Bay. But just use this as a guidance on how we use numbers, and then eventually to our advantage if we were buying or selling a house. Okay, so in California, so for the most part here, what we'll be doing is we'll compare to the latest data, month of data that we have compared to the previous month. So in this case, for the upper left-hand side, there's three types of data that we're going to be looking at. And we're looking at June 2020. We have number of sales, so not to confuse with the dollar amount. So we had 339,000 in seasonally adjusted homes sold in June 2020. Comparing that to May 2020, that's up 42%. So that's a good thing. That means it's picking up. But if we compare that to June 2019, we're still down. So what does that mean? On the right-hand side, you'll see that means that the market activity is getting better, but we're not yet still at the level of 2019. The second line item here on is the unsold inventory, right? So inventory means here is if the sellers stop putting new homes for sale in the market today, how long would we run out of homes to sell? So as of June 2020 in California, we would run out of inventory to sell in 2.7 months. If we compare that to May, that's down 4.7 months. So that means in May 2020, you would have had more choices if you were the buyer. Okay, because that means there's just more homes to sell. And in June 2019, it was 3.4 months. So if we compare it, we have less options right now as a buyer. So if you're the seller, it might be a good time to sell because that means the inventory is not that much. You could be commanding a better price. And for the buyers, not so good because now you have to be buying at a higher price, and you'll see that on the next on the one right below. So, but just to put some perspective on the right-hand side for the second section of the inventory, anything that's less than 3 months, typically, that's what we call as a seller's market. If it's 3 to 6 months, it's a neutral market. And if it's more than 6 months, then it's a buyer's market, which is kind of like what happened in 2008 in the financial crisis. Okay, so then people are asking, did the price go up for even now with COVID? And the answer is yes. The data shows that The median price for June 2020 for all of California is 626,000, and that's actually going to be lower in LA County. And a big part of that, you would consider that there are other areas, um, like San Francisco, that have super high prices, that brings up the price for California. But for LA County, it's going to be lower. But just sticking to this slide for now, median price is 626. Comparing that to May 2020, that's 6.5% higher. And if you compare that to June 2019, that's 2.5% higher. Now we're going to go to LA County. So we have four different charts here that we're going to be looking at. We're going to start on the upper left-hand side. The median price in this case in LA County, yes, is 610,000. And right below that number, you'll see here is 11.6% M2M. That means month to month. So from May 2020, that's an 11.6% increase. And if you compare that from last year, that's 1.8% increase. So that means there was a dip, possibly, and I would say that there was a dip of prices in end of March, April, and May for the prices when sellers were getting scared and they were just happy to sell a house. And then now the prices have gone up. That's why you see that big jump. Okay. On the lower left-hand side is the home sales. Okay. And this tells us that year to year, there's still less than 19% on the number of homes. So it's been consistent with California that, if you compare it from 1 year ago, there's still a decrease on the number of homes being sold. So that just means that even though if there's a higher price, the inventory though has not caught up yet. So maybe in the way I would interpret that, it's not here, but there's a statistics that I saw that sellers right now are 20 to 30% more scared on selling a house, on fear that they might not get the price that they want. But actually, contrary to that belief, it's gonna be the opposite, because sellers have been selling it more, especially in June and right now in July. Matter of fact, I just had a listing in Torrance that sold for higher than what we listed it for. Okay, but if we compare that, right, if we look at below 19%, there's a 37.5% increase for the number of homes sold month to date. So comparing it to May 2020. And on the upper left-hand side for the inventory, we have 3 months of inventory right now. So, you're bordering between a seller's market to a buyer's market there, because we said that if it's, not a buyer's market, but I should say neutral market. So it really depends on what city you're looking at, and even in that city, what zip code. So that's when we would go into possibly like a virtual consultation if you're selling or buying a home, because that would be too specific already. So now we're going to go to South Bay, and you'll see here on the left-hand side, these are the cities, and the cities are broken down. I'm going to go from left to right. You'll see the different zip codes, and I'm going to jump to the right, second to the last on the right side, which is, it says here, number of homes sold percentage from June 2019 to June 2020. So depending on what zip code, you could have a drastic differences on the number of homes sold. And then on the right-hand side, it talks about the percentage change on the sale price. So some are selling 1% below the sale price, as you can see here in Carson. And then on the different area in Carson, it's 3% higher. So if you can go towards the bottom here of the average in South Bay, what we're seeing here is there's still about 18% less, 18.5% less of number of homes being sold. But on the average, the homes are selling for about 8% more. Okay, so that's where we're at. And depending again what market you're looking at, I have seen homes sell for about not a wide range, but about 3 to 7. So I would say 8% would be a good percentage. So 3 to 8%. So that's what we've been looking at for the South Bay area of LA County. So continuing the effects of COVID-19, this chart And I know if you, I already include, at the bottom, I mentioned it here. If you added a percentage, it's kind of weird that it doesn't add up to 100%. But even if we take out 65% and just added the changes on what the buyers want, it still doesn't add up to 100%. But the way we would use this chart is we do know that there's been a change of behavior on the buyer's end because of COVID-19. So that one thing is clear. And personally, me as an agent, I see what the buyers have been wanting and all of that. The way we would interpret this is I already know most likely than not that if I speak to the buyer, these are the things that they might be looking for, right? Now, if you're a seller, and if you're willing to spend some money to fix up your place, or you think that you really have to fix up your place anyway before you're selling, knowing these statistics will help you figure out what part where you think will you get the most bang for your buck, right? So if the house is big enough that you can convert maybe one area into a home office or something right now, that tells us that that might be the best place for you to put your money in if you have some limited amount. And but some still like their pool, especially now that people are staying at home. They want some more place for them, for their kids to enjoy, or even for the adults if it's a pool. Or it never grows old when you have to fix your bathroom or the kitchen. That always adds value. But right now, at the top of it is having a home office. So, and I've seen that time and again with buyers, and I've seen when sellers do this, that's when they get a lot of money for their price. We're going a little bit on loans on this one for the next two slides. And right now, what I want to say is based on the Forbes article that I saw, and I think it's accurate. With me having a lending background in the past, I've never seen it this low. Granted that my history with financial institutions for becoming a real estate agent was about, give or take, I think about 12 years. But based on the Forbes magazine, we've never seen this low, as low as this ever, ever, ever. So to put that in perspective and put some numbers into it, from year 2019, this is like towards the end of 2019 to pre-COVID levels, the interest rate was about 4%. Right now, you can get a 30-year fix at 3%, and somebody has told me that it could even be lower right now. But at the time that I was doing this one, maybe about a week or two ago, this was the rates. And if you did a 20% down payment, 30-year fix, what payment would that look like? For 4%, it was about 2,674. For 3%, it's 2,361. So you could have been buying the same exact house, but just took financing during COVID because that's the environment that we're in now, and you could have technically been saving 10% on your um, on your interest rate, and technically that house for you would have been 10% cheaper. That's what that means in numbers. Now, it depends if the down payment that you're doing is going to be smaller, like the government sponsored program, which is about 5%, and whatnot. So really what this rate means on the average is actually it comes down to about 7.5 to about 12% on how much you're saving if you got your financing now and bought a home now, for the buyers on the call. So in summary, the buyer demand is up. The seller bounce back, meaning for the sellers to be putting their homes for sale in the market, has not met the buyer demand. Because of that, that has caused the price to increase because you have all of these pool of buyers, but there's not that many sellers that are putting homes in the market. So one and two kind of like goes hand in hand. Number three is kind of like putting that together because of that less sales, right? You're getting that higher price. So when we're strategizing on the buyer's end and on the seller's end, there's different ways that we should be strategizing, and there's data that we need to be looking at. So we're making the best informed pricing and decision when we're putting our offer out there as a seller or as a buyer. Number four is there's been a shift in what the buyers are looking for, and the sellers need to be aware of this one as well. And number five would be the mortgage rates right now are at its historic low. So if you're a buyer, definitely you want to get you want to be thinking about this one. If you have a home right now, maybe it's time for you to, if you want to sell that home, get a good price from it, get a mortgage now that you could get a lower rate and go to a different home. And maybe you just go from one home to another that has this has the same pricing, or maybe you could do an upgrade now or whatnot. Just understanding the loans. So these are the main types of loans that you can be doing. So whether you're buying a home or you're refinancing, these are the loans that you're going to be looking at. So the main things are conventional FHA loan, so that's government sponsored program, and VA loan, that's also the government sponsored program. So if you're doing a down payment for conventional, typically not always, it's 20%. FHA is 3.5%, or right now I think it's they only have the 5% program. A couple of things have been changing because of the pandemic, and for VA loans still 0%. And then points. So when you're getting a loan, whether you're refinancing or buying a home, you'll hear the lender say, "What's the here are your points and your fees." Okay, so points is basically it's based on the loan amount, not the value of the house, but the loan amount, and the charge is between 1 to 1.25%. So if you're buying a $500,000 home, you did a conventional lending of putting down 20%, so that's 100,000. Your loan amount now is 400,000, right? And the 1% of that 400,000 is 4,000, so that's the points. That's separate from the fees that you have to be paying also. And what are the fees? It could be origination fees, appraisal, escrow, title, and then if you have your mortgage insurance and all the other things in here. Mattel Credit Union, for those that are members, actually, and for those that are non-members, it's easy to become a member, like what I mentioned in the slide a while ago. Whether you're refinancing or buying a home, and I can talk to you a little bit more about that. If you're interested, just send me an email, and my contact information is going to be towards the last slide later on. They actually have a HELOC program where um, it's a it's still a 30-year loan, and you could choose a 20-year loan if you wanted to. But just for the sake of conversation, it's a 30-year loan. The first 10 years is fixed, and the remainder becomes variable. And you want to understand what that means a little bit more, and I can help explain that for those that want to. And but that's going to be discussed a little bit more again on Thursday. But that one is about 2.9% in the fees. Everything, including the points and fees, from my understanding, is no more than 2,000. So that's really low. So if you're refinancing, that's a great program. If you're buying, that's a great program. So what are the mistakes to avoid for buyers, right? Number one would be, especially now that the prices are increasing, not knowing your budget would be detrimental. And the way you would figure that out would be to get a pre-approval from a lender. Okay. And I would suggest that you get at least, if you can get three, great. Just to compare, but at the minimum two, just so you know that what are the deals out there, just like anything else. Number two is it's all about the price. So people think it's all about the price, and this would be good for buyers and sellers to know, because to me, as a real estate agent professional, it's not all about the price. There are contingencies that goes into when you're buying or selling a home, and the contingencies would be having an inspection. So let me break this one down. If I was representing the buyer, right, the for the ways to buyers for buyers to back out on a deal is there are three contingencies that are built into the contract. You have your inspection contingency, that if you see stuff on the inspection like plumbing or whatever, for whatever purpose, the functionalities of the house, it's something that you're not willing to do. If it's maybe something's broken or whatnot, you can back out. If it's for an appraisal, if it doesn't appraise for the value that it should be, you could ask the seller to bring it down. Or if you really want the house, and you would just put more down payment, but then you have an idea of what the house is valued at. Number three is loan contingency, right? And also if you can get the loan or not, finally, once you've chosen that home. Number four is the number of days in escrow. So if you really want the home, you might not have the highest offer, but if you can if you can offer a shortened number of days that you can close it. And we can talk a little bit about more about this one because we're going to get into too much of technical details here. But if you can close it, if you think about it on the seller's end, if there are two offers of the same price, but they can get their money quicker on the other person, they would go with the one that can close sooner. So that's what that is. Now, if you're the seller, the reason why it's not all about the price is somebody could be offering more, but their down payment is less. So if the value of the appraisal does not come in as what we were hoping for, if that buyer does not have as much of a down payment that they can have, even if they want the house, they might not be able to still buy it. So now they would have to cancel. Versus somebody that may not have offered as high of a price, if they have a lot of money as a down payment, they have enough to cover themselves and still push through with the loan. Okay, so that's why it's not all about the price. Number three is there's plenty of time. So there's a lot that goes into it. So you just want to think about it. If you're a buyer, that if you have a contract that expiring, a lease contract, is somebody in the family going to have a baby soon that you want to be able to move before the trimester comes? Maybe you want to move into a particular school district before school starts, right? So there's a lot. And when we do the virtual consultation, we can talk about those things. Lastly, if you're a buyer or even if you're a seller, not knowing what the trust is. But basically, it's the difference between if you had to pass down your asset. Like for me, I'm a homeowner, and if me and my wife pass away, we want it to go to our children. If we don't have a trust, even if we have a will, it has to go through probate. So you don't want that, and there's a lot of cost that's going to be associated to that. But by doing a trust, there's still a cost to it, but it's going to be a lot less. Mistakes to avoid for sellers, using Zillow as a price expectation. Zillow, I'll use one example on why it's not accurate. So if there was two houses on the same street, one here and one here, but the one on this house, the house is here, has a golf course view, but the one that's being sold on the other street does not have that view. The one that's being sold here, compared to all of the other prices in the area that doesn't have the view, it will bring this price down because it doesn't see that there's a view. So right now that house will become undervalued. Or it depends on what's happening, but that's just one example. Or in the other case, typically what happens in California, because of the algorithm of Zillow, I don't know, they don't divulge exactly what goes into the algorithm, but for the majority, the Z estimate or what you see in there is going to be higher. And when I say Zillow here, I'm not just saying Zillow, but I'm saying this into more of the websites in general. Okay, so but so that's why when I look at the price comparison, I would do like manual pulls of areas, look at the view, look at the interior, because the interiors could be different from one house to another. Right, one could be completely remodeled, the other one was not. The computer doesn't see pictures, right? Expecting a full price but not doing the necessary marketing is another thing that the seller should be wary of. So we might have a hot market, but if the interiors was not fixed up, it's not staged properly, and things like that, then and if we're not pricing it, so 2A would be the pricing. If the house is worth, even at the peak of it, is 700,000. Even if there's a push from the market because it's a great market right now, you're looking at maybe increasing it at the most 8% typically if you had to push it. But if you price it way more, then people are not going to be buying it. So pricing is really one of your most effective marketing tools. So you don't want to price it too high now that people are not going to even pay attention because it's being put at a ridiculous price. And then letter B is having high quality photos, staging, and so it can get the right amount of exposure and other marketing strategies. So like for me, I represented the seller recently, and I even did like mail outs to the neighborhood, like 150 mail outs, and other things like social media. So we want to make sure that we do all of those things. And the 110-2 rule, right? What that means is if you expose a home to 100 people, 100 agents, you'll probably get 10 showings. And out of those 10 showings, you'll get 2 offers. So the more exposure you do, the better chances you're going to get an offer. Okay. And again, the same thing from the buyer's end. you also want to plan on the seller's end. You're thinking that you have plenty of time. So if you want to factor in everything that you need to, so we know what type of time frame we're looking at. So that would be something that would be done on a virtual consultation basis or physical consultation when it's safe to do so. Right? So this is just the importance of doing a correct pricing. So as you'll see here, if you have a market value pricing, you'll get 60%. But if you price it lower, you'll get more exposure, 75%. But once you push it to 10%, the amount of exposure lessens. Mistakes to avoid for buyers and sellers. So number one would be generalizing the market, and technically one and two would go hand in hand. Number one, let me just expound on that a little bit more. People will ask me, "Hey, Conrad, how's the market like?" As you can see, uh, California could be this way, but it could be different in New York. And in California, once you go to the micro level in South Bay and once you go into the cities, one zip code could have a different data from what the other zip code is, what's happening on the other zip code, right? And so knowing the statistics in those cities is going to be very important. And one thing that I think is not as exposed to the general public. So you know that cities are segregated by zip codes. That's one way of doing it. But actually, on the realtor's agent side, it's also divided by MLS areas. And MLS areas could be divided by major streets. So it could be in the same zip code, but it could be divided by a major street, and that one street versus the other could have a difference. So I'll give an example. One way looking at that is Torrance. I'm going to use this as an example because there's like four zip codes in Torrance, 4 or 5 zip codes in Torrance, and the zip codes could have different things happening. In the city of Torrance, for those that are not aware, in one area you could be in the Torrance of Unified School District, or you could be in the LA Unified School District, right? So different people will have different wants. You could be in the same city of Torrance, but have different services from the city. And last but not the least, even like in Gardena, you could be in Gardena, but it's actually still within the scope of the city of Torrance. So you want to know those little things, and sometimes looking at the MLS areas also helps. And if we do have an opportunity for those that want to have to do a virtual consultation, one thing that we'll do is also if for those that are renting, or we'll do something that's very specific to you. For example, those that are renting will compare what your rent options are versus if you were to buy a house. In this particular scenario, we actually compared somebody that was going to rent for 2 years, that were going to spend $67,200 in rent, versus if they were to buy a home, their expense would have been only $60,000 on the right hand side here, and that area, if they owned it, would be increasing for about $65,000 a year. And just to make sure that I'm not misleading anyone, the reason why the cost for them was low is because on the interest monthly here, they were only going to be paying $1,500 monthly in interest. So we didn't consider the whole mortgage because part of that mortgage is principal, and that's not really an expense. That goes back to you. That goes back to your equity. Okay, so that's why if you don't include that, then that's what happened here. The cost was only $60,200. Now, if you're selling a home or whatnot, we'll have something that's crafted for you because you're going to have your own specific questions. I hope you learned a thing or two today. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.